Okay, good morning. So we are today going to be doing the end. We have to finish Samach Amud Aleph, the last third, and we will be doing today Samach Amud Beis. But where we are up to right now is about 15 lines up, where it says Hanichnas L'Krach, when somebody comes into a city. So Hanichnas L'Krach, somebody comes into a city. So turn up on. If you remember back just before we go further, the Mishnah told us back on Indalid, right? The Mishnah told us that Hanichnas the Krach Mispal Shtayim. If somebody comes into a city, he should have in two tefillas. Achas b'chnisa, one when he comes in, achas b'tziyas, and one when he leaves. Benazai Aimer, Arba, you say four tefillas. Shtayim b'chnisa, so Shtayim b'tziyas. You say two when you come in and two when you leave. That's what the Mishnah told us. So Rashi explains over here that we're going with Ben Azai to explain what is the four different brachas that we are making. And as it turns out that according to Ben Azai, you make one bracha right before you enter the city, one when you actually enter the city, one when you're about to leave the city, and one when you leave the city. So Tana Rabban, what do you say when you're coming into the city? You ask Hashem to bring you into the city in peace. When you actually enter the city, you say thank you to Hashem. Hashem lefanecha, Hashem lekai. You thank Hashem for taking you into the city in peace. Bikesh lotzes, what happens when you're ready to leave the city? So you daven again that Hashem should take you out from this city in peace. Yatsa, when you actually leave the city, you say thank you to Hashem for taking you out of the city in peace. In the same way that Hashem is taking you out in peace, so too He should bring you to wherever you're going. Should take you to wherever you're going in peace. It says right, and He should support you in peace. He should keep you in peace and safe, and make sure all your goings on are good. Right, it should rescue you from all the pitfalls and troubles, etc., traps that a person can face. What does it sound like? Sounds like Tefillas Hadarach, which you all remember, which we had back where? On Chavtas Amud Beis. So Ben Azai is taking the fourth of his brachas that have to do with the city. The second, when you leave the city, is cribbing off of Tefillas Hadarach. Okay, continue the Gemara. Rav Masna. Rav Masna now is qualifying this idea that you make all these brachas when you're coming, leaving cities, etc. So Rav Masna says, Loishna el bekrach she'ein danan v'hargin bay. When do you make this bracha? That's only in a situation when you're dealing with a city that doesn't judge you and kills you. In other words, you're dealing with a city that kills you and doesn't really do too much adjudication. However, but if you have a city that really does adjudicate, that really doesn't just kill willy nilly, but it takes the time to do Drisha Chakira and figure out if you are in fact deserving of death. So, if such a situation, less than then you don't have to make such a bracha. Why? I think this is a very interesting Gemara. Right? Normally we say, look at all the Gemaras in Avodah, right? Which during the times of the Akum, right? Again, we know the Meiri. Everybody knows the Meiri Avodah Zarah. So many times the Meiri, Bava Kama Lamaches, right? That the Akum is different, right? Remember the Gemara in Bava Kama Kufiyat Zayin. During the times of the Persians, they allowed murder. They didn't care about it, but the Greeks they don't allow it. So it sounds like Rav Masna is making a full-throated support of the judicial system, the judiciary in ancient, Babylonia, wherever it was that he lived, that we don't have to make azab bracha when you can rely on the judicial system. Another say, even this version of Rav Masna doesn't agree with what we just said. This version of Rav Masna says that even in a city where they are doing Drisha Hakira and they don't just kill willy-nilly, right? Sometimes you don't have a person. Sometimes you're not going to be able to have witnesses who are going to testify on your behalf. So since that's the case, you should always make a bracha that Hashem should be helping you out when you're leaving, coming into a city. So we have two versions of Ramasna. On the first version, I do believe that this is another one of those supports where it's very interesting because it sounds like you could rely on the Akum to make fear adjudications. Okay, continues the Gemara. So Tana Rabbanan, Hanichnas lebeis hamerchat. If somebody comes into a bathhouse, again, it's not something that we're so accustomed to, in the sense of this wasn't a mikvah. The bathhouses were I believe that still today, it's actually in the culture. Turkish bathhouses in the Nordics, they have such thing in Germany. So they have different places around the world where they still have this kind of a culture. Where you go into the bathhouse, the schwitz to sort of make you healthy. So, so when we've had it numerous times here in Brachot, right? We had right where we had the Gemara. We had the Gemara that well, we had the situation where somebody was Makabel Shabbos, right? And then he went to the bathhouse, right? But it was before the Gezer, the Gemara said, right? Where was the Gemara? The Gemara told us this. The Gemara said, the Gemara told us this back where? Oh, it's Chav Zayin base. So the Gemara said, Pamach Spal Rebbe Shal Shabbos Be'erev Shabbos. Once Rebbe davened Kabbalah Shabbos on Erev Shabbos. And then he went to the Schwitz. The Yatzav V'Shan Al Perk, and then he gave shir. And it was still very early. So Rava explained that that was Hahuda Nichlas Lazia. That was to go sweat out. It was like a healthy thing. The Kaidim Gezerah happened. It was before the Gezerah. Rashi told us, actually, Gazra al Gezerah. It was before they made a Gezerah on Zayah. But you see that this was a relatively common thing. We have other Gemaras to talk about how people will go into the bathhouses. So they went into the bathhouse, and you should make a bracha. So what was the bracha they made? You should save me from this and from things that are like this. What's the fear when you go into the bathhouse? We're going to see a story in a second. What would otherwise the fear be? I'm not sure. Shouldn't happen. Anything negative is going to happen to me. If something negative, a sin is going to happen to me, so then my misa should be a kapar for all my averis. This was the blessing that was thought that you say when you come into the bathhouse. Abai says doesn't make any sense. You should not say this kind of a bracha. Why? Right? We had the more before in your test. A person shouldn't open his mouth to the satan by you coming in and saying, well, if I have a sin, if I have a problem, then my misa should be a kapara for me. That's being tiftach pela satan. Amr Shlakish, v'chein tanam shmei Rabbi Yosi, lo el ma yiftach anam pela satan. The person should never open up his mouth to the satan. We give a proof, the same proof that we had in the test. Amr Rabbi Yosi, my car. What does it mean in pasuk? The pasuk tells us, "Dechtiv kimat kistema yinu la'amar daminu." Right, we say that the Jewish people were like considered like Sidaim, like Amar. They were so terrible. There were actions. And Maya Hadalahu Navi. And what did the Navi respond back? Right. Once the Jewish people refer to themselves as Sidaim, then the Navi responds back that the Jewish people are being now referred to as Sodomites. Right? It's terrible. But they opened up for themselves by calling themselves that. They're saying about themselves that we're like Sidaim, we're like Amira. So then Hashem refers to them as Katsine Sidaim. But had they not opened their mouth, then Hashem wanted to refer to them in that way. And therefore, it's a lesson to us not to be opening our mouths to Satan. Fine. So it says the Gemara, Kinafik Mai, when you finish the bathhouse, what bracha do you make? So Kinafik Mai, what do you say? Ravacha Maidani Lefanach Hashem. Ravacha says you make a bracha thanking Hashem. Maidani Lefanach Hashem Lakai Shetzaltani Min Ha'or. That you save me from the fire. I mean, the bathhouse is very hot. Maybe there's some danger. Ravo all lebeit beni. Ravo went to the bathhouse. Afkas bebeni mitute. right? So the bathhouse, whatever the schwitz that he was at, it basically caved in. So Srachish Lanisa, so it became a big nace. That what? Kom al Amuda, Shezib, Mea B'chad, Gaver B'chad Avre. So 101 people were able to basically rescue themselves on his arm. Now, if you look at Rashi, Rashi makes it out that it doesn't sound like what we just read it. Right? The way we just read it is that he was, Superman, right? He put out his arm, and 101 people were able to hold on and latch on for safety. Rashi says that's not what happened. Look at Rashi. Mizroi hechzik echad. Right? He put out his arm. One person held on to his arm. Shnai, maybe two people. And they made like a chain. And that's how they were able to all be saved. So I'm not sure how that would necessarily work, but that's how Rashi wants to explain it. In other words, it sounds like from this Rashi that he's sort of moderating what would otherwise be an unbelievable nace. Imagine having 101 people sort of sitting on your arm and being rescued from the collapsing bathhouse. So the Gemara says that Rabavo then responded with this incredible nace and said, "Amar Hamid Ravacha." This is what Ravacha said. What did Ravacha say when you're leaving the bathhouse? That Hashem should save you from the fire. He said, "Amar Hamid Ravacha." Amar Ravacha. But I'm sorry, the Ravacha said something else. That in other words, another bracha that Ravacha suggested. The bracha of being saved from the bathhouse is not the one that I think he was referring to, but rather the idea that Ravacha was suggesting that whenever one is coming to a situation where there's potentially some danger, one should make a bracha. So that happens to be in a bathhouse. That also happens to be in a situation of where one goes in bloodless. Right? That was thought to be a medicinal a practice that was very helpful for people to bloodlet. They used to use leeches and things that we would find super gross. That's how they used to do it. And they did it, by the way, until like the 1800s. They were still doing it. Maybe they still do it today, but they were doing it for a long time. So Ravacha says, "Dam Ravacha nichnas leikis dam." Somebody's coming to do bloodletting. I mean, he writes Mefanach Hashem, elakashi esik zeli the refuah v'terpaini. That this asik of this business of the bloodletting should be refuah and should heal me. Ki el reifei neman atza refuascha emes, because you Hashem are the reifei neman. You're the true healer, and your healings are true. Because it's not the normative approach to take a refuah, but rather this is just the custom that people do. So therefore, we're able to go to the doctor. In a shocking person shouldn't say this bracha. The time is very Shmuel, the famous Gemara, that you shouldn't make this bracha. Why? Because of the fact that the Torah says that a person is able to go to the doctor, because the person says because of the fact that Torah already gave rishus to the doctors to heal. So kikoi my omer. So what then should he say? Kikoi my omer ba'acha baruch roife chinam, or as the Gra says baruch roife chaylan. That the Ger says not to make this thing about Hashem is the Reifei Neman and he's really the Rascha Emes, and I'm just doing this because this is the dark of people to say. No, you should just say Baruch Reifei Chaylim. In other words, a person is going to be make his dam, he should say Baruch Reifei Chaylim. Now there is a couple of things to just mention here. Number one, that there is a bracha that doctors should say. There was not something that you see normally, but there was a doctor in town who passed away during COVID. And he would always make the bracha, the doctor, that Hashem is the right faith chaylim when he would give a shot. I remember every time I would bring my kids in for a shot, he would always make the bracha. There was a fulfillment of this idea. Should also mention that from this Gemara, it sounds like there's a debate between Rav Acha and Abaya as to what's the appropriate bracha, because is it appropriate to go to a doctor? In other words, it sounds like from the way Abai is learning, since the Torah says "V'rappi mekanshinit na rishus l'rappa" is that it's normal to go to a doctor. There's no problem. It's not like, oh my God, I'm doing something that's outside the derech hatava, that's totally not normal. I have to make the special. No, the Torah says "V'rappi mekan na rishus l'rappa." If you look at the Ramban in the end of Vayikra, Parshas B'Chosai, The Ramban there is a famous Ramban, and you have to read this Ramban inside to see what I mean. But you'll see that the Ramban, who was a doctor, is not happy with the healing that doctors do. He was clearly not comfortable with it. And the Ramban's, I'm 100% sure that he is um, thinking about this Gemara as he's writing his comment, because over there he says that yes, it's true, Rappe, Mikachin, Rishus the Refa Rappes, and then he uses the words because Kfar Nagu. Now notice that the Kfar Nagu is where? In Ravacha, not in Abaya. Right? So according to the way the Ramban is learning, he's taking the Kfar Nagu, which is essentially the head that the Ravacha has to be able to go to the doctor, because really Hashem is the Reifei Neman and not the doctor. And he's using that for Abaya. That the Rappi, Mekanchin in the Rishus L'Roi for the rabbis. Why? Because Kfar Nagu. That's not ideal. Yes? So he's qualifying the Tanat of Erev Shmuel. That's the Ramban. Because I'm almost positive that's the right way to read the Ramban, and that's what he's doing over here. So even the Tanat of Erev Shmuel, which sounds like it's Pashut arguing with, right, the way Abai is learning it, Pashut arguing for Vacha, that it's not a B'di Evet, it's Pashut totally mutter, l'chatchila, the Ramban saying Kfar Nagu. Why does the Ramban say that? So if you look over there, you see the Ramban says that really, if we lived ideal lives, then we would always go to the Navi to get healed. When we talk about refuas hanefesh or refuas haguf, all refuas of the guf are because of chalei hanefesh. Real punishments should come about because somebody has something wrong internally. Now, how does this work? I've always been bothered by this part of the Ramban. How does this work with the Gemaras that we had before in the beginning of Brachot? On hey, they're talking about Yisur and Shalava. Right? If somebody has Yisur, right, the first thing is supposed to be Fashish and Maisav, and then after the Fashish and Maisav, and he has nothing wrong because he's the only perfect guy, so then he should say it's Bittul Torah, and after Bittul Torah, you should know it's Yisur and Shalava. So you see, sometimes you have Refuah Aguf, you have Chayli Aguf, and it's not because of the Neshama problem. It's that Hashem wants to give you more schar. Hashem wants to enhance your life. I don't know how to deal with that one. Put that on the side. But it's clear to me that according to the Ramban, the Teva way that we live is not the ideal. The ideal is, and the way they lived during the times of the first Beis Hamikdash, is that when somebody had a problem, they went to the Navi. You have a Nebuch, a Machla. And that's not because of the fact that there's just Teva. No. You have something internally in your spirit that has to be reformed too. First, you go to the Navi. He gives you the refuah for the nefesh, and then you'll have a refuah for the guf. And then people decided, what does it mean, says the Ramban? What does it mean that the right has permission to do refuahs? Because people refused, because there's no more nevuah. We've had many times that there's no more nevuah anymore. Right? There's no more nisim anymore after the second Beis Hamikdash, Esther, right? So there's no more nisim, so there's no more nevuah, and there's no more these kinds of things. So now everybody decides to use derech hateva. So now mikan that the Reif has permission to do healing, the derech hateva, because that's how the world is living. That's the kfar nagu. Good. All right, that's a bit of a background on that. And lastly, just to point out, the end of the kedushin, what we said over there is about that the Reifim are going to Gehenim. Why is that? That's because they become very egotistical about the fact that they're able to make refuahs. But fundamentally, they're just a messenger of their Rebbeinu Shalom. They're just a shlich, an intermediary. So they learned how to manipulate a little of the derech hateva. Now they're going to walk around saying, "I wear a white coat, therefore I'm special." That's the reason for that. They have to remain humble. That Hashem ultimately is the Refei Cholim, and they're just an intermediary to utilize the derech hateva and recognize that they're not providing the refuah hanefesh. They're only doing the derech hateva, the refuah haguf. Okay. Finish the march. Now we're turning the page. 2, Samach Amud Beis. When somebody comes into the bathroom, no, does anybody say this? When you come into the bathroom, what should you say? You should say honorable people, right? Honorable people, honorable angels, who are, the helpers of the one above. Tanu cover the Israel. Give honor to God. Wait for me until I'm done with my needs. The Eser Tzoni. until I have to do what I have to do, and then I will return to you. A person shouldn't say this. Because maybe they won't stay and wait. You know what you should say instead? Shimruni, Shimruni. Right? Watch for me. Izruni, Izruni. Help me. Samchuni, Samchuni. Keep me steadfast. I'm tinuli. Wait for me. Actually, until I come in and go out. You can't document Adam because that is the way that people talk. That's the way that people do this. Kinafik, and when a person comes out, I'm Baruch Adam. Now, on this little line in this Gemara, I've thought about a bunch over the years as follows. Number one, does anybody here make this bracha when you come into the bathroom? The answer is no. I think the answer to this, about why this bracha went out of fashion, in the same way we talked about, according to Ramah, why the brachas on Gisham went out of fashion, in the same way we talked about with the Rush, he wants to make certain brachas and it wasn't. Each, you have to look at each one's story. Do you remember the Gemara that we had way back in, it was on, where was it? It was the end of the third paragraph, right? The Gemara told us here on Chavav that they had very special bathrooms. Hani bote kisoy de parsoi. Remember the Gemara there? The Persian bathrooms were unbelievable. Afagav isbu tsoya kestumendami. Right? Even though they had tsoya, they're clean. Kestumendami. Why? Because they must have had some sort of a channel system where they would be able to take it out. If you go to Israel and you go to see the Roman, in Caesarea, Beit Shan, they have these big amphitheaters that they built for the various games that they did. So you also see the public bathrooms. Right? Very different than our very different approach. There's a public, everybody's making together, unbelievable, kumbaya. So the lack of tznius is one thing that you notice. But the second thing that you notice is that they would channel water underneath them. They had seats, and then they had underneath water to keep everything moving around and being clean. Very fascinating because they understood that this kind of thing can cause sickness, disease, whatever. It's unhealthy, and not just unsightly, I assume. So I think that this bracha went out of fashion when bathrooms became progressively more and more clean. And you no longer worry about shit. Remember the Gemaras that we had? We had Gemaras, right? About what to do with the tefillin, right? Remember the Gemaras about the tefillin? Right? You put it on the outside, the inside, the zayna, like how much crazy stuff, right? We talked about before, as we are now concluding bracha. So doing our review over here, right? Remember the Gemara told us that it was a situation where a person is going to put on his tefillin in a bathroom. He can even carry it in his hand. Right? Why can he carry it in his hand? Because if he's not going to carry it in his hand and he leaves it outside, it could be a zayin is going to come along and take it and make a whole thing in the base medrash. What kind of these are not things that we can relate to anymore because we have bathrooms in our own houses. We all live today in the 2000s better than any king lived in the 1500s or the 1600s. Right? We have toilet paper, we have bathrooms, we have air conditioning. That none of this existed. So I think that's probably why the bracha went out of fashion. But there's a backstory here that I still want to nevertheless touch on, and that is, so when they had the bathroom like this, outside, nervous, the shading, they're making a bracha. This sounds like, if you look at the bracha carefully, it sounds pretty clear to me that who are they davening to? What does Rashi say? You're davening to who? The angels. Are you allowed to daven to angels? Right? There's two issues. Then davening, I always love to give, shiurma. One is davening to the dead, and one is davening to angels. So I'll tell you at the outset, I'm an Erbiliner. So there's a tshuva from the Chassam Sofer in Orach Chaim in Kuf Samach Vav. The Chassam Sofer says that he doesn't say Lachnise Rachamim. He brings on the Maral, Sivas Olam. Maral's also, I'm not sure if he was an Erbiliner, but he was a rabbi in Prague, so he was an honorary Erbiliner. There also, it's a problem. This tefillah. She was going back to the Shem. We let us say Machnisa Rachman. So some service says that he elongates his tachnon so that the chazan gets the Shem Yisrael by the time he gets up. So he never says Machnisa Rachman. What does it sound like? It sounds like to you in the shul that they did say it. Okay, whatever, but he didn't say it. Why didn't he say it? He said Machnisa Rachman. You're davening to angels. You're allowed to daven to angels. You only daven to Einam Levadai. You're only allowed to daven to the one above. I don't want to go any more into it. We don't have time, but that is one issue. What makes it even more unbelievably interesting to me is the Rambam. The Rambam here in Hilchos Tefillah, the Rambam says that when you come into the bathroom, you say all these things. Now, the truth is, he doesn't give the whole long list, right? He says, when you come into the bathroom, before you come, you say, right? That's clearly talking about the angels. So he doesn't give the whole laundry list, but he gives the beginning of the first understanding, and then he gives up Abaya's aspect that you shouldn't say the whole thing. He just talks about Shemuni. But he doesn't talk about Izruni, he doesn't talk about Simchuni, Hamtinu, he doesn't do any of that. But Shemuni, he says. Mishar Elyon, he says. The Rambam is the king of saying you cannot dive into the angels. And all the time he doesn't buy into the existence of Shadim and the oldest thing he doesn't take. I'm here he's saying you say the bracha. So the answer, listen to the lashon of the Rambam. Because this is how people do it. What does that mean? It sounds like from the Rambam. And I just to give you an example, the Rambam in Hilchos Stam, the Rambam Hilchos Stam says that I just luckily opened it at Parak Hey in Hilchos Stam. The Rambam says, anybody puts Shemus of Malachim on the mezuzah, Shemus Kedeshim, my pasuk, Chasamis, Hareim B'chal Misha Ein Len Chelik Olam Haba. These people have no Chelik in Olam Haba. Why? Shilu at Tipshim. Not only they're ruining the mitzvah, they're taking a mitzvah that is the yichud of Hashem. They're making it like a kamela. Anias atzman. He's not a fan of mixing in the angels into mitzvahs. And yet here, so how did this include? He said that that's how people do it. Sounds like what? He's not really buying into it, but this is just a custom. However, look at the Gemara. What did Abaya say? Abaya said, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't say it the way the first version was, because maybe the angels are going to leave. What should you say? Because that's the custom of people. I mean, the Lashon of Rambam, he got it from where? He got it from here. But for Abaya, the reason to say it this was because maybe they won't stay. And she came back from the and that's how people actually say it. But for the Rambam who holds that you cannot say anything about Malachim, I think he's using Shekein Dak and Shabbat Adam different the way Abaya used it. Abaya used it in order to give you the nusach of how people use. But the Rambam's using it to explain why you're able to daven to angels in this one instance where he accepts it. Okay? All right, but this is a much bigger topic. I can't get into more. Look into more Shabbos Kafir test about like the Malachim on Shabbos. Do you say Shalom Aleichem? Many people don't say Shalom Aleichem. Most people do, and no one thinks twice about it. But there are those who have a problem with saying Shalom Aleichem. All right, we have to move on. Continues the Gemara. Okay. So where are we up to? Kinafik, when you leave the bathroom, everyone knows this, and we're not going to have to explain it, right? Everyone knows Asher Yatzar. So you should say Asher Yatzar when a person leaves. What is the amazing aspect of Asher Yatzar? What are we thanking? So if you look in the Taisus, the top two Taisus in over here, so Taisus says, because this is unbelievable, if a person would take anything, right? Any sort of a bag or a cask or whatever, and you make a hole even the size of a machat, right? Whatever the contents were of that thing, if it's not a solid, it's going to be gone. And Hashem makes a human being with all the orifices that we have, and yet our soul doesn't leave us. Yet we're still able to contain our brains inside our head. Things don't leave. We take it as normal, as natural. It's not a big deal, but it's an unbelievable big deal. This is Ashiyatz. Ashiyatz is done the genius. I really don't have time. I'll just tell you because I can't resist. So nobody, right, takes that. I shouldn't say nobody. Now there's been a concerted effort to make Ashiyatz very serious. People with signs on the bathrooms, but many people say Ashiyatz chaplap, Ashiyatz, right? So you know the joke. What's the joke? Ashiyatz is very upset. Ashiyatz yeah, I'm not the full joke. I shouldn't say because it's really a waste. But anyway, Ashiyatza was very upset. I'm not going to say the full joke. The Ashiyatza was very upset. It says the Kosh Baruch, nobody takes me seriously. They just run through me like they come into the bathroom if they say me at all. As soon as I'm going to make you a special place, I'm going to make Ashiyatza by the chuppah. Everyone's going to be wow, Ashiyatza. Okay, fine. There's more to the joke, but not for right now. Continues the Gemara. So. Yeah, so how do you finish the bracha? My chasim, how do you finish the bracha? Amrav reifei chaylim. Which is interesting because then if it comes out that this is reifei chaylim, if that was, we're going to change it in a second. But if the gear says reifei chaylim, then it's cute how this would fit with the gross gear, right? At the end of Samach, right? If you look at the end of Samach, right? Rav Achan's version was Baruch reifei chinam, but the gross changed it to Baruch reifei chaylim. So if that was Baruch reifei chaylim, and this is Baruch reifei chaylim, then it comes out very nicely how you're putting these together. Maybe that's how the gross got it. I don't know. Obviously, it's very similar spelling wise. Amar Shmuel, no, that doesn't work. Amar Shmuel Koshavinu Abba Lakuli Alma Kitsiri. So Shmuel says Abba is the way he respectfully referred to him. Look at that back and the Gemara Memzan. We had it already. So he says you can't talk like this because then every person who's going to make the bracha Shiyatzer is like a sick person. He says Baruch Reifei Chaylim. We're not sick. We're Baruch Hashem healthy. So it says well, you should do it differently. Ela Reifei Chol Basar. Hashem is the healer of all flesh. Amar he does wonders. Therefore, we should do both. If you notice, this is the third time that we've had Amar Papa We had it back on Nantes, Amar Aleph, Nantes on base, and now we have it again on Samach on base, and we also have Megillah Chaf Aleph. This is clearly Rav Papa and his way of attempting to be Messiah of various things to make it all work together. Again, when it comes to these brachas, Ma'bev the bracha, why not say extra? Okay. Fine. Continues the Gemara. So now we know that a person should ask Yatsa when he comes out from the bathroom, and he should end it off Reifei Chalbasar Mafilasis. Says the Gemara. Reifei Chalbasar. Yeah. So we're up to here. Hanichnas liyashan amitasi. Right. When somebody's coming into bed, so what does he say? So hanichnas lishan amitasi. When somebody's coming to sleep, Omer mishma Yisrael b'hayim shemaya. So you should say from Shema until b'hayim shemaya. What is this predicated on? No, what's this predicated on? We had a Gemara. We're just doing this now to tie all the Gemaras and Brachot together, right? What did the Gemara tell us back, way back? No, the Gemara told us on the bottom of Dalam and Beis. Amar Shimon Levi Af Bishkarim Kriya Shema Beis. That Knesset says even though a person said already Shema Shul mitzvah the Krasa Al Mitasa, a person has a mitzvah to read it on his bed. Amar Yosi. Micro rigs of Al Takato Uluvavkam Shravkim there Musel Amrav Nachman Im Tam Chacham. So he doesn't have to say Shema if he's a Tam Chacham. Amar Baya Av Tam Chacham Mebaya Leila Memachab Suga Derachme. Even if Tam Chacham has to say something, but that way you got the idea of saying Kriya Shema Al Hamita. What is Kriya Shema Al Hamita going to do? It's going to protect you from the shadim. It's going to give you a good night's sleep, etc. But fundamentally, right? Rav Nachman said you don't have to do it if you're a Tam Chacham. Why should Ragum Mishnasei Lachsag Gusazir Tamid? A person who's the Talmid Chacham, who's always going over his learning, he doesn't need to say it. But for regular people like us, we have to say Shema, what we call Kriyat Shema Mitasi, even though you already were Yaitz Zayin. In other words, if you said Shema early or you didn't daven, okay, so then you have to say Kriyat Shema Mitasi just to calm your mitzvah of Shema. But if you already said Shema, you said it on time, so why do you have to say Kriyat Shema Mitasi? You already did Shema twice a day. You already did V'shach B'chav V'kumecha. You don't have to do Shema again. No, you're saying Kriyat Shema Mitasi, they give you a good night's sleep. And remember, we talked about Meiri. Should you say it Al Mitasi, Samachum Mitasi? Remember all of that. Fine. So says the Gemara. So when a person's coming to bed, he should say Mishmai Sabayim Shmaya, V'amar Baruch Hamapel, and then he should say Hamapel Chevle Shena, right? Al Einai, right? The bonds of sleep in my eyes are still Al Apai in my eyelids. Umer Isham Bas Ayin. We just had the more about Bas Ayin, right? The apple of his eye. Yiratzim Fanach Hashem. Elokai she'etzishkivenu l'shalom sin chelki v'sarasacha v'sargilenu l'dei mitzvah v'al targilenu l'dei avera v'al tavinu l'dei chet V'lo de avayim, v'lo de nesayim, v'lo de v'zayim, should be it's a tov, I should be it's a harm, it says, then in Pegah, Mechalayim Ram, Vayivaluni Chalim is Ram, Virum Ram, V'tehem Mitas Yishlem, right, by Yaakov, we also said, Mitas Yishlem, that's when it was the time for him to say, the brachos of the sons, he realized all of his kids were around, they were all good, so it was, you look at Rashi, Mitas Yishlem, Shalei Pstul, V'rasha Bizarre, right, the same lashon that we had by Yaakov Avinu there. Okay? So that is to say, when a person is going to sleep, he should say Shema, and not only should he say Shema, we have now a bracha of Hamapil as well. Fine. So what? Now we're going to keep on the what sort of a daily person's grind. So ki mitar, when you get up, what do you say? Everyone knows this. So I just want to say something that my father pointed out to me years ago. Everybody says, right? So what are you davening? Right? The God of my soul. No. My father said the way you should daven this, and the appropriate way, which I think is correct, is Elokai Kama. Neshama Shanasata B'Tahirahi. Ata Vrasa, Ata Yitzarta, Ata Nefach Leviva, Ata Masham V'Kir, Ata Os Lilamimani, Lachazira Bila, Os Lavi, Kos Man Shanasham V'Kiri, Maidani. Who's talking here? Who's talking? And the bracha of Elokai Nasham, who's talking? No? The Guf. The Guf is saying to the Rebbeinu Shalom, thank you Hashem for the opportunity for a soul to be alive. I very much think that this is the Pashup Pshat. Put in the comma after Elokai. Neshama Shanasata B. Concept about B. Who's the B? B is me. Who is me? My Guf. Fine. Says the Gemara. Elokai Neshama Shanasata B'Dori Toyit Sarta. Atana Fakta B'Vata Mesham V'Kiri V'Ata Osnul Mimenu. Achziv V'Los Novi. Goes Man Shanasham V'Kiri. Maidani L'Fanach Hashem L'Kav V'Kev Seri Ben Kolman Nekol Hashem B'Chat Hashem Achs Hashem is the Gar Mason. So everyone knows that is what you say when you get up. So in other words, the first bracha when you're getting up, it sounds like what? Right, is the bracha of the kind of shama. We say obviously Madani, the first thing that we say when we get up, but it sounds like in bed you would say the kind of shama. He shama called Tyre Nagarla. Right, Taisus points out over here that if you look at the Taisvis, I'm trying to figure out where it is. I can't see it right now. I'm not sure where it is right now. Oh, maybe it's Rabbeinu Chananel. Rabbeinu Chananel, yeah. Rabbeinu Chananel says, "V'hashiz lo yaminu rabbanan keseder, osir rabbanan b'atzur v'tiklim mei barakas v'tiklim l'memrinu al seder." So we doing that. We not do this whole thing al seder. We're not doing it when we get up. When we do this, but this is the early way they used to make the brachas. Right? So Kishama Kol Tanago, when you hear the chickens, so Lema Baruch Hashem Nasan Sechvina, right? Sechvi is the chicken. So he gave the chicken the wisdom. When you open your eyes, Lema Baruch Paikachivim, you give sight to the blind. Kitaris, when you sit up, Yosef, Lema Baruch Mate Asurim. Kilovich, when you get dressed, Lema Baruch Malbasharumim. Kizakif, when you stand up, Lema Baruch Zakif Kifufim. Kinachas La'ar, when you take your first step, Lema Baruch Paikar Tzalamayim. Thank Hashem for putting the earth so you could actually walk. Himaske, when you're actually walking, Leman Baruch Hamechon Tzadigover for firming up your steps. Hisayim Nisane, when you put it on your shoes, Leman Baruch Shasali Got Sarki. He also Hamanya Leman, when you put it on your belt, Baruch Yisrael B'Gvur, Hashem who girds the Jewish people in strength. He Parasudra Resha, when you put on your hat, right? This idea that the people wear yarmulkes is one of the sources. He Parasudra Resha, when a person put on his hat, Leman Baruch Yisrael B'Safar, Hashem who's making the Jewish people resplendent with splendor. When you put on tefillin on your head, when you put tefillin on your head, then you should make the bracha of al mitzvahs tefillin. When you wash your hands. So what does this mean? What does this sound like? This is very weird. No, when you wash your hands is what? After you put on tefillin. That sounds very odd. No, it doesn't even fit with what we had the Gemara before. If you remember, we had the Gemara before. It was a weird situation. It sounded like it was very odd, right? What happened before? We had a situation where we had the situation where what? Where Rav we had a situation where Rav was wash in one situation. It sounded like he put on tefillin before he put on tefillin before he said Shema, right? Which didn't sound like it was so normal to do. We had to explain, like, oh, that situation, that was because of the fact that he had a bad shamish who didn't do his job correctly. So, where was the Gemara? I'm not seeing it here right now. The Gemara was, the Gemara was, um, no, um, it was right here. No, oh, here on your dollar base. The Gemara said that we had two versions of what Rav's behavior was. Right? It sounded like in one place that what Rav did was Rav was Mashiyad, he washed his hands, occur Kriyashma, and then he decided Shema, Vanach Tefillin, then he put on Tefillin. Bitzolim, then he davened. So it sounded like he said Shema before he put on Tefillin. And then another place it sounds like he put on Tefillin, then he said Shema. And we know that somebody called Kir Kirshman Blade Tefillin, Kilame and a Sheker Batsamai. So the more over there says it was Shlich with the Abbas. Whatever, the Tefillin came late, so he had to do it a different way. But what do you do first? Mashiyada. First you wash your hands. So you wash your hands after you put on Tefillin, after you put on tzitzis. I don't understand exactly what the order is. I have to leave that on the side. Also, we're missing a bracha here. Right? What's the bracha that we're missing that we haven't said yet? No, the Gemara told us what's the bracha. The Gemara told us back on Yud Aleph that a person has to make the bracha of what? Brachot Torah. Until we haven't said anything, right? You're putting on tefillin, tzitzis, everything, but you haven't said Brachot Torah. All right, I'm not sure. Anyhow, Taisus over here is a very famous Taisus. Taisus talks about the Gemara Menachos. You make a bracha on lahaniach and al mitzvahs. According to Rashi, the basic idea is that you're making each one of these brachas, but according to Rashi, the reason is because you can't say lahaniach after on your head tefillin because you already said it on the hand tefillin. You already have tefillin on. Taisa says that you would make both brachas on the head tefillin if you didn't, for example, put on the hand. Right? It's two separate mitzvahs, daraisa. So if you put on the head tefillin alone, you would make two brachas. Right? Taisa says that's not like you could make two brachas. Taisa says also if you would interrupt, right, you would end up making two brachas as well on the shel reish. Okay. Fine. So we're now in the situation where a person washed his hands and he's making a bracha. Kimashi yad lim bracha shisham says to turn on tias yadayim. Kimashi apim wash your face. Lim bracha hamav v'chev l'shenim einus lim hafapa. You right? Then you say make the bracha of hamav v'shenim. Yotzim l'fanach Hashem l'ken shetag lim sar sav l'abikinim etzesecha. Yal tviyin lo dechev lo de'aber b'avim lo de'nizayim lo de'vizayim kevet shenim l'shtab lo k'zarchenim me'adam ram mechavarov l'abikinim etzetem mechavar tov. Lo ylam chos sineni ayem mechad mechen chas rachamim. What does it sound like? It sounds like the Gemara we had on Tezayin, all the different various endings. This ending is not one of those, and that's how we end up saying the end of the brachas. But what we haven't seen is bracha Torah. We'll have to stop here.